dive into something that might be boring for some of you, which is ethics. Basically, what we'll be talking about is how to operationalize ethics in artificial intelligence. Oh, okay. What is that? I don't think it's my presentation. Oh, next one? Oh. That's not mine. The other way around. You're going back. I'm going backward, yeah? Oh, can you explain? What? Yeah, that's great. Okay, fantastic. Okay. So when we're talking about how to operationalize ethics, the point is made because my experience working with organizations, public and private, is that mostly when we're talking about ethics, most of you would understand what ethics is, and you might definitely have kind of a definition of what ethics is. Basic definition is ethics is the assessment of bad and good, right? Which for me as a philosopher would bring to the next question, which is, okay, what do we mean by good? What do we mean by bad? So it's not really the great definition that we are all expecting. And most organizations, when they have to implement ethics, they are facing a difficulty that has been actually noticed and highlighted by the World Economic Forum, and which is called the intention-action gap. And this intention-action gap has been studied by IBM in collaboration with Oxford Economics. And what they've seen, actually, they surveyed 1,200 executives from 22 countries around the world. And what they've seen is that basically, you certainly all know about these requirements that are the requirements of the guidelines, the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI that has been established in 2019. Those requirements, when they adopt them, which is the upper line on the screen, they have difficulty to make them actionable. Okay, let's say that you want to be transparent. You say, okay, I will adopt transparency. I have good intention about being transparent about my algorithm, being transparent about what's inside my black box, being transparent about the fact that people are interacting with AI system. I really want to do that, right? So I adopt that, and then I'm confronted to the situation, what do I do now? What's the next step? How can I do that in my specific field of activities for a specific use case in a specific cultural setting? And this is where most companies have a difficulty, which explains the fact that you have this abstraction level inconsistency, showing that actually, while you have barely 55% of the executives who actually adopted the requirements, you only have something like 20% of them who made them actionable, who operationalized them, right? That's not because of some kind of bad will or the fact that they are just getting rid of these requirements. Is because mostly, and this is exactly what I'm facing with when I'm working with organizations, they don't know where to start and they don't know how to move from this high level of abstraction. I hope I'm, gosh. Okay, I get. Oh, okay. Cool. Okay, so high level of abstraction of all the requirements. The problem with these requirements that are misleadingly presented as principles is that they've been set at a really high level of people, right? The European Union, the high-level expert group on artificial intelligence, right? And they've set this kind of language, those words, those concept notions that are, for all of them, without exception, poorly defined. If you look for a definition for each of these words, you will face hours of difficulties, and you will definitely not find anything that you might be using in your own activities. So for companies, the problem is that high level of abstraction is totally the opposite of what they're doing. When you're leading or when you're running a company, when you're working in an organization, you need things that are really practical, right? You need to take the principles or the requirements and to implement them directly in your activities. You don't have time for discussion, deliberation, and trying to find the right definition for the right product that you're developing, that you're implementing, that you're using, right? You really need something that might be easily implementable, which is good for me because that's my business to bridge the gap between those two levels of abstraction, right? And most companies, they're calling me or other people, other ethicists, to help them to make that possible. when we enter into this wording, we are actually not entering into ethics. We are entering into what I call cosmetics. Cosmetics because it's kind of a makeup. Those words, those concepts that are conceptual nonsenses, and I'm referring to Thomas Metzinger, the German philosopher who was part of the high-level expert group on AI. They are conceptual nonsenses, and they are just here to make sure that things look prettier than they really are, right? So this is not ethics. If you just try to implement that and you say, okay, I got to be transparent, I got to be accountable, that's definitely not sufficient. This is using the words of ethics without doing ethics. Ethics is way more complex than that, right? And if you really want to do ethics, you will definitely have to dive into the intricacies of ethics, of philosophy. And I'm sorry for that, ethics is philosophy. Ethics is not about the laws. Ethics is not about communication. Ethics is not about politics. Ethics is about philosophy. So if you want to do ethics for real, then you will have to do some kind of philosophy. Not that I'm saying that you have to do philosophy for the sake of philosophy. That might be a bit arid and boring at some point, but you really have to know your philosophy, right? That's all about ethics. So when we are here, actually companies are a bit in a situation where they really don't know what all these ethics things are. They have a sense that it's something really important, definitely. They are aware of the importance of ethics, but they don't really know what it means. And most of the people that are working in the field, actually they have a really shallow understanding of what ethics is based on these cosmetics, these wordings. And they're just trying to apply those requirements to their activity, which obviously doesn't work. So because of this misunderstanding, of this lack of understanding of what ethics is, or maybe the fear of ethics because it's kind of complex at some point, most companies are really reluctant to enter into ethics. Just back to this one, there is also something that might be stressed here, is that you have something like 40%, a bit more than 40% of the executives that are actually not even adopting the requirements here, which is pretty concerning to me, but anyway. It's not that they don't want it, that they have a really, once again, shallow understanding of ethics, and most of them, they fear the disadvantages of ethics. Obviously, it will incur additional costs, right? When you're hiring someone like me, a consultant in ethics, you have to pay me, for sure, right? And that's an additional cost, and that's for real, that's true, right? But saying that it will slow down rate of innovation, that's something that is pretty disputable. That's not true at all. It drains resources. I would not say it drains resources. It will obviously ask you to provide some resources to the people you're working with in order to make ethics possible, but it will not drain the resources per se. It definitely not weakens competitiveness. Quite the contrary, I would say, right? If you do ethics for real, that's something that you can sell with your product and your activities, right? So you get a lot of a prioris by companies that are based on this high level of abstraction requirements that are really poorly defined, and in which most of people that I work with that are not ethicists, that are not lawyers, are totally lost into translation when they have to apply that in the real life. So what can we do with all that? I actually served in the French Air Force for 27 years, and in the French Air Force we had what we call the OODA loop. I don't know if some of you know about the OODA loop. No? Observe, orient, decide, act. And the very idea was that is saying, okay, when you are in the field, when you are confronted to battle, something like that, you get to speed up the decision process to be very efficient, right? And so what you do is that you collect information, then you have to process the information, then you have to make a decision quite quick, right? And you cannot do that right on the field. You have to anticipate that, so you have to put in place processes, methods, and structure to make sure that when people will be deployed on the theater of operation, they will be able to go really fast and make decisions really fast. So I've used that in what I call the Caddy cycle, which is basically the idea that when you're an organization and that you're lost in all this wording, in all this narrative, you don't know where to start, you're actually acting within what I call an ethical noise. The ethical noise is made of the words that we've seen, right? Trustworthy AI, that's nonsense. Responsible AI, totally nonsense in ethics. In these words, right, you are surrounded by the noise made by new regulations that are happening all the time, new products, new technologies, new use cases, new actors, new things all the time. And then, like an AI, you're collecting all those data, you process them, and then you try to implement them, and then you try to go to the next step, which is action, make a decision for your company, right? If you want to go fast, and if you want to do better, then where you have to act is at the analytical step, right? Because when you're collecting things, you get a lot of things that are surrounding you, and depending on your culture, depending on your background, depending on lots of things, you will have different, perspective or different understanding of what's going on, right? If you want to make sure that all the people in your organization are starting from the same page, have the same understanding of what this ethical noise is about, then you have to act at the analytical part. And then you have to provide your teams with tools that will help them to go faster in analyzing the ethical noise, right? Which is something that is really, really important. And then you can implement that, and then you can make a decision. So obviously, there are lots of things that you can do in organization that we are doing when we're helping organization. We are providing them with methods, structures, and tools. As you can see here, what we're trying to do is we try to make sure that the ethical surface is as wide as possible. When I'm talking about ethical surface, what I mean is to make sure that ethics is pervading the whole organization. It's not something that is held only by one person that is in charge of ethics, but that it's something that is here in the company, and that people, whatever their activities, whatever their role, whatever their function in the company, are aware of the fact that ethics is really important, right? So you provide the whole team with all these kind of all kind of things. Reflection, deliberation. Obviously, you have collaborative work, which sounds obvious, but which is definitely not obvious, and especially in big companies, I can see that people are working in silos, right? And sometimes they do not discuss with each other, which is definitely problematic when you want to establish this culture of ethics. You have to establish what we call the common language, right? What do we mean by ethics? What do we mean by artificial intelligence? What do we mean by transparency in our specific field of activity for this specific use case, right? You can put lots of people around the table and tell them about ethics for hours. The funny thing is that we will all use the same word, which is ethics, but we will not put the same meaning behind the word, right? Meaning that at the very end of the meeting, maybe you will not be able to move to the next step, which is to action all those ethical requirements. So you need this common language. You need to establish as ethical or ethics committee. When I'm talking about ethics committee, and that's something that I really want to raise here, is that mostly ethics committee are lacking ethicists, right? I don't have anything against lawyers. They're really great people, right? But lawyer is not an ethicist is not a lawyer. And if you want to have a real ethics committee, you will need an ethicist at some point. That's something that is compulsory. The opposite is you must not only have ethicists or philosophers. That might be really boring and counterproductive. You need a lot of people around the table, from the HR, IT people, the CEO, legal people, etc., just to have a really wide discussion. And then you have to establish this culture of ethics. About the tools, you have a multi-level mapping, you have 360 feedbacks, you know that, but we can do that with ethics. We do a lot of red teaming. I don't know if you've heard about red teaming, which is how to anticipate the next step, the next technology, the next problems that might arise, and how can we deal with that, right? Anticipating the risks and trying to deal with that by anticipation. Doing ethics by design, which is also something really important. But I think that the main point that is totally missed is deliberation. And I think that it's something that you might be aware of. Deliberation is kind of a rude word for organizations, because deliberation means time, right? It means that you have to put people around the table, you will have discussion, you will have an ethicist that will be here to moderate the discussion, to organize the discussion, and to try to take the best of the discussion at the very end, and then to bring that to the CEO of the company. So ethical deliberation might be seen as a waste of time, right? At the very beginning, it's kind of a waste of time. But once you are used to the process, when you know how to make deliberation, there are 4 phases, 13 steps to follow. That's pretty easy, right? Once you know how to do that, that goes really fast. That goes really fast. And the point is that with this kind of deliberation, you go beyond compliance, you go post-compliance. And post-compliance is not only ticking boxes, it's about, okay, let's say that I have to be at the same time transparent and to respect privacy. And sometimes those 2 requirements will collide. I've already seen that in the health industry, right? How can you do that? How can you deal with that? How can you address this dilemma? It's only by deliberation, right? So once you've done it once, you will not have to do exactly the same thing twice and 3 times, etc. Right? Once it's done, right? And then you are acculturated to the process. So you go faster and faster and faster with the deliberation process, and then you're able to do better, right? Which is definitely something great. And then what you're able to do with that is that you are able to understand that the costs that are incurred by ethics and that were seen as something that was pejorative or that might be problematic at the very beginning is becoming something that will benefit the company, right? Because you're able to implement ethics for real. And if you're able to implement ethics for real, obviously that will lead to lots of improvement, okay? Improvement of the social impact that you have with your company, improvement in the public reputation, which is definitely great, improvement also regarding investors, right? And that's the big question that investors are asking today is, how can I make sure that the company or the organization I'm investing in is doing things in an ethical way, right? And lots of investors are asking that, right? So if you're able to prove that you have processes, methods, structures, that you have people that are in charge of ethics, that ethics is pervading all around the company, that's definitely an asset for your company or for your organization. So what you do here is that you turn something that you see as a negative impact to a very beneficial impact, okay? And that's something that is really, really great, really good, I guess. By the way, maybe some of you might be interested in that. With the Human Technology Foundation, we are establishing a group, because this is something that has been asked by many of the people we're working with, a group of key players in the field of generative AI, right? Which is, the new focus of AI today. A lot of people are concerned about generative AI, what can be done with generative AI, and what might be the adverse impact of generative AI. So we're creating this group of key players from the Silicon Valley. We get a lot of providers, we get investors, we get also public administration, regulators, heavy users of artificial intelligence that we will just gather, that we're gathering actually, to discuss and to do deliberation, to understand what is beyond compliance, and also to avoid what we've seen at the very beginning of this presentation, the establishment of principles. Principles are really nice, but the problem with principles is that they do not last that long. I myself contributed to a discussion of experts. It was the fourth round out of 5 rounds. And only for our round, we were 40 people around the table, and we established 37 principles for a responsible AI. My point is that too many principles kill principles, right? And if everything is a principle, nothing is a principle, right? Only 1 round out of 5, 37 principles. And if you look, and certainly you do that all the time, if you look at what is available on the internet, you will find hundreds, if not thousands, of principles. And when you're an organization, you feel like, okay, which one is relevant in my specific case? So principles are great. I don't have anything against principles, but they're not flexible enough. So what is better is to establish best practices that are adjustable to the evolution of the technology, to the evolution of the regulatory framework, that are also adjustable to the expectation of the public. Right? Something that might be totally unacceptable, ethically speaking, today, might become acceptable within 5, 10 years, who knows, right? And then you have to adjust to that. The point is that with regulation, what happens is that once you've seen that there is something new happening, generative AI, and look at the AI Act, how it's working right now, right? You establish a regulation, and then the generative AI is just happening. So you say, oh, I have to adjust my regulation. It takes time before you adjust to the new technology, right? What's happening between the time when this new technology appears and the time when you have a regulation? Nothing, right? And the principle will not help you. Best practices will help you. So with this group of stakeholders, what we're trying to do is we're trying to define or list the impacts of generative AI in real time and to adjust to them in real time, right? So the point is not to set principles that we'll put to the public in a report. It's much more about, okay, how can we adjust in real time, waiting for a legal regulatory framework. That might be the AI Act or something else, right? So if you're interested in this initiative, please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. But I think that's something really important, is that we can gather all those people that are from different backgrounds with different understanding around the table to have some time to deliberate and even to anticipate what's next. If you are a regulator and you don't really have access correctly to providers, you might not be aware of what the providers are working with and what might be the next technology. So what will happen is that when the technology will appear on the market, you will have to react to the technology, and then it will take time to have a regulation, right? If you have this kind of forum, then you're able to discuss with people to understand what their mindset is, what their mind programming is. If you are able to discuss with those guys from the public administration and users, then you are able to anticipate and to adjust quickly to the new technology. So this is what we're doing. We're just trying to make sure that people understand that ethics might be really beneficial. And obviously, when I'm going to companies and I say, okay, you have to pay me to help you, one of the first questions is, okay, what is the return on investment? I want a figure, and I cannot offer a figure. I don't know, right? I cannot tell you, okay, if you hire me, you will jump 3%, 5%. I don't know. So most of the companies say, okay, okay, interesting, but then ethics go really low in the priority list, which is totally normal, right? Companies are here to make profits, benefits. They're not here just to put money on the table waiting for something that they don't know about. But I can tell you that even if I cannot give you a figure, that will be very beneficial to have ethics. And once again, I'm advocating for real ethics, not cosmetics, not this ethics that is made of a narrative that we don't know about, that we are unable to correctly define. I'm saying that ethics is really important. Do not fall into the trap of philosophy for the sake of philosophy. I've seen that, companies hiring philosophers. I love philosophers, but philosophers, most of the time, they're not really, aligned with what companies are doing, right? Philosophy in a classroom is something great, but it's not about how can I implement that into the practical world of companies, right? Companies don't have time to discuss about Emmanuel Kant. You cannot go to an ethics committee and say, okay, you must start by reading the Metaphysics of Morals by Emmanuel Kant in German if you can, right? That doesn't work. They don't care about that. They want really easy and fast solutions. That's also something I was discussing with some of you during the lunch, some difficulties that I'm facing. Lots of people are asking, okay, can you just provide me with one slide, 4 bullet points about what can I do? That's not the way it works. You will need to have some kind of ethical deliberation. Okay, I think I'm running out of time, okay? So if you want to do that, there are different steps that are here on the slide. I will not go through all the steps because I know that I will face difficulties. But it's something that must be really rationalized, right? It's really important to have a really serious way of implementing ethics. I will stop here. Thank you for your attention. If you want to contact me, please feel free to do it by email or LinkedIn.